Traders, how are you? Marcello, founder of the Day Trading Academy, co-founder of Speed Up Trader, where you guys can come and apply to use a funded account with us rather than your own account when you're trading. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. So overall, first let me say thank you all of you guys for the birthday wishes. I'm recording this on my birthday. I'm 29 years again. Today, or this week I should say, mostly affected by the situation with the coronavirus. The entire world seems like it's shut down, even though not everybody, most countries have, and states in the United States as well, have set up lockdowns, quarantines to be able to try to help with the virus. Some other people are saying that we still have other people saying, for example, like Trump, that we want to reopen the economy, and also Bolsonaro in Brazil, the president of Brazil, vehemently defying trying to set up a lockdown, even though his governors are doing it for him. Overall this week, the U.S. stocks were higher on Monday due to the $1 trillion in global stimulus and also hope that this is going to be over very soon. There's also signs that the outbreak in Italy, Spain, and the U.S. may be lower. Tuesday, there was a huge rally and then a fall. The Dow actually went up about 900 points. This was due to the virus death and infection rates climbing in the absence of any economic data. Wednesday, U.S. market stocks rallied again. Coronavirus, on the news that the coronavirus may be leveling off. And also Bernie Sanders canceled his campaign, which was the far left candidate. He calls himself the Democratic Socialist, and that also gave people hope that the country wasn't going to be under those laws, or those ideals, I should say. And remember, when I do the program, I'm talking a lot about what the analysts say. I'm not going to get political, so it doesn't matter if you're left, right, black, white, purple, green. I always try to stay just with the facts, because I think most of us are a bit tired of all this political infighting. I'm sure you guys would agree with that. Other than that, on Thursday, we saw further advances after OPEC Plus, which is OPEC Plus, I call them the oil mafia, plus Russia decided to meet to be able to decide how much they're going to cut production. S&P 500 had its best week since 1974, even though it was closed on Friday for the holiday. Good Friday. Happy Easter to all of you. And the U.S. indices for the week, the Dow was up 12.66%. For the year, it is down 16.89%. S&P 500 is up 12.10%. For the year, it's down 13.65%. And the NASDAQ this week was up 10.58%, even though it's still down 17.83% so far this year. On overseas market news, Germany's benchmark DAX stock index soared another 4.6% early in the market on Tuesday, technically leaving the bear market, the official bear market. Remember, whenever a stock index from a country drops below 20% from the peak, that means that it's officially entered bear territory, or in other words, a downward trend, a confirmed downward trend. Other than that, Euro markets are far higher. The German DAX was up 10.90%. Latin America and Canada markets, Bovespa was the biggest winner there, 11.71% positive. And Africa and Middle Eastern markets, Egypt was the biggest winner at 9.16%. And in the far east, the Sensex in India went up 12.93%. Philippines was up 3.06%. Bitcoin and other crypto news. Bitcoin, for the most part, has been stuck within a range in the low 7,000s or so. On Friday, it dropped $200 in minutes, breaking outside of that range to the downside. And for the week, it's down 2.26% at 6,840. Financial and banking news in the U.S. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, however you guys want to pronounce it, because everybody seems to say it different. Over 3,000 lenders participated in the $349 billion small business coronavirus loan program. The Fed and the Treasury worked to set up facilities to support Main Street and municipal borrowers. Trump is also asking Congress for an additional $250 billion in emergency economic aid for small businesses in the U.S. to try to encourage small enterprises to keep their employees and pay overhead costs during the pandemic closures. Japan also, this I think is absolutely just out there. Japan is finalizing plans for a massive stimulus package at about $990 billion. It's equal to about 20, almost a quarter of their economic output to counter the fallout of the virus. And if you guys don't know, Japan has been in this vicious circle for decades now where they're literally just buying up their own debt and try to continue to do more stimulus to be able to spur the economy. And it really hasn't helped that much because they haven't grown that much at all. In the U.S., the stimulus is going to exceed 11% of output, and in Germany, it's going to be about 5%. Remember that Germany is the largest economy in Europe. And I don't know about you guys, I've warned about this crisis and what was coming and precious metals, about, how it's a good investment. Remember, it's for educational purposes only. It's not trading advice. We're not trading advisors. We don't trade people's money. But now you can't even find precious metals anymore, right? You can't buy physical precious metals. So the time to buy would have been before everything hit. And now things are starting to get a little bit crazy. In Australia, the first of 11 nations rated AAA by S&P has been given a negative outlook, and the parliament returned to pass an emergency $80 billion JobKeeper bill. The total fiscal support in Australia is now at $197 billion. But despite the fiscal stimulus, they are expected to hit a recession. It's going to be the first time in 3 decades, which is a record. On Thursday, the European Union finance minister wrapped up talks with all the countries with an agreement of a package of 500 billion euros to try to assist the businesses and also the people in the Eurozone. The unresolved situation, however, is how they're going to split the financial burden, which has bitterly divided them. It's the classic fight in Europe where the southern countries, places like Spain, Italy, and Greece, are not very financially prudent. Whereas the northern countries, Norway, Germany, Sweden, the Swiss, a little bit more financially prudent, so they're able to take out more loans and do more stimulus. So classic debate. It's always been the situation in Europe most likely was going to break up the European Union as well, at least at the way that we know it now. Other than that, Continental Resources Harold Hamm states that the plunging oil demand and dwindling storage options are not going to be not going to help with the coordinated supply cut between Saudi Arabia, OPEC, and Russia. It's going to force U.S. producers to voluntarily cut production by about 30 to 35%. And on Thursday, they did come to an agreement to cut about 10 million barrels per day, even though a lot of analysts are saying that it's not going to be enough due to the fact that demand, due to the coronavirus situation, has fallen some 30%. Prices probably aren't going to increase in the near term, even if there is an agreement. And they did have a situation where Mexico, one of the members of OPEC, threatened to leave OPEC and also didn't want to abide by what they agreed to for the production cuts because they finally are starting to get the production up. U.S. imported just 401,000 barrels of oil per day from Saudi Arabia in January. It's down 44% from a year ago, the lowest monthly since the mid-1980s. And Russia imported just 95 barrels in January. Overall, crude for the week is down 24.51%. It went down to 22.71. It sounds like really big numbers, but because the price has gone so low now, it's really not going up and down that much, $2, $3, $4, but it seems like a big number because the percentage is bigger based on the lower price. It's down overall 61.57% for the year. International Brent is down 8.35% for the week and down nearly 51.5% for the year. On Thursday, precious metals mostly higher on Thursday. There's a lot of demand, much higher demand for silver and gold as investors are now looking for safety versus other assets. If you guys didn't watch the video that I did on the loss that I was holding, I did it in a presentation that I had in a seminar for our traders in the United States, but I talked about what's going on in silver, which is relative to gold as well, but how I'm mostly trading the silver miners, again, only for educational purposes. Those regulators want to make sure we say that. So remember, I'm not giving you trading advice. I'm just talking about what I'm doing. I'm probably giving you some ideas of what to look at, but you can see that, silver was slammed down all the way down to $12, and now it's all the way back up to $16 for the week. It finished at $15.50. It went up 7.04%, and it's that mining price that I told you guys about, which is probably a little bit lower right now, but it did come right back up. Gold for the week up 3.93% at $1,686. And political news, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the UK, is continuing in intensive care. If I'm not mistaken, he was released after the third day. There might be a different update in regards to that. He did receive an oxygen ventilator to be able to help with the symptoms he was receiving from the coronavirus. Pandemic has killed about 5,000 people in the UK, which is the world's 5th largest economy. One thing that's really interesting is California on its own, with about, if I'm not mistaken, 40 million people, roughly, it's just under 40 million people, has the 5th largest economy in the world on its own, mostly due to the Silicon Valley, these trillion-dollar companies, Facebook, Google, Amazon. Well, not really Amazon, because that's in Seattle, but you guys know what I mean. And the UK, if I'm not mistaken, has roughly 70, 80 million people, and their economy is actually smaller than California, even though they have 30, 40% more people. Imagine that, the prowess of the United States. Other than that, Israeli government is issuing orders on Tuesdays to make wearing masks in public compulsory to be able to try to help with the situation on the coronavirus, to be able to limit that. In economic news, India's 3-week lockdown is set to end this coming week. It's the largest lockdown in the world, 1.3 billion people. Unfortunately, due to the poverty rates there in India and in other countries as well that have started these quarantines, a lot of people are out of work and forced to live. Those that are forced to live day to day, the guys on the street and at the lights, for example, they were forced to flee their homes and go to the countryside for food and shelter. Bank of France is stating that the French economy shrank by the most since World War II at 6% in Q1. Also, they're stating that the outlook for the rest of this year is worsening due to the situation with the demand and supply collapsing due to the coronavirus epidemic. Export-driven Germany, which is Europe's largest economy, is expected by 5 leading German institutes to probably shrink by 9.8%. It's the biggest decline on records since the records began in 1970. Forced closure businesses across the U.S. and a surge in unemployment has forced the U.S. growth to contract by 30%, according to some analysts in Q2, and 5% overall in 2020. And evidence suggests with the recent jobless reports and the employment reports that unemployment may rise by as high as 20%, 20. It's very high. Number of Americans seeking unemployment benefits is at 6.61 million in the last 3 weeks, likely to reach a staggering 15 million as the coronavirus outbreak is starting to signal that we may have a deep recession rather than a very quick turnaround like a lot of the people in the government are saying. And this one is a big one. U.S. consumer prices fell by the most in 5 years in March, with the CPI down by 0.4%, with further decreases very, very likely. Obviously, again, this is due to the coronavirus. In corporate news, Airbus shelves plans to expand the assembly line for the A321neo just 10 weeks after they launched the expansion plans, obviously because no one wants to buy airplanes right now. Boeing is also planning to cut their workforce by 10%, involving buyouts, early retirements, and involuntary layoffs. And Tesla is also reportedly furloughing 50% of their delivery and sales employees. A lot of analysts are actually stating that they're in big trouble in Europe now that big companies like Mercedes, Volkswagen are getting to the electric car race, which they have dominated over the last few years. Trade news, many analysts are now questioning whether the UK is going to meet the deadline at the end of 2020 to set a free trade deal with the European Union, after which Britain said that it's going to leave the single market with no deal or revert back to the WTO, World Trade Organization rules. And technology, And great news for China, bad news for the U.S. China is now the largest source of applications for international patents in the world in 2019, pushing the United States out of the top spot, which is held for more than 40 years. In total, they registered 58,990 applications in China compared to the U.S., which was at 57,840. So just about 1,100 more or so more than the United States. And Apple and Google are partnering to help authorities track the exposure of the coronavirus using Bluetooth technology. They're going to work on a platform to enable contact tracing that's going to identify people who have been exposed to the virus and who they have been in contact with. That was announced on Friday. What could possibly go wrong? Other than that, Canada's lifting the freeze on weapons exports to Saudi Arabia, has renegotiated a controversial $14 billion contract to sell General Dynamics Corp armored vehicles to the Saudi Arabian kingdom. If you guys remember, there was a big fiasco around the world how Saudi Arabia supposedly killed Khashoggi, which was a journalist. Everybody shunned Saudi Arabia, and now everything's okay. Other than that, international events. Tuesday, the pace of coronavirus deaths in Spain is up again for the first time in 5 days. It killed 743 people overnight, taking the total to almost 14,000, the second highest in the world after Italy. Total cases rise to 140,000, just over 140,000, the highest in Europe and second in the world after the United States, discounting the numbers, the inaccurate reports from China. And a Saudi-led coalition fighting in Yemen's Iran-aligned Houthi movement announced a ceasefire due to the situation in the world due to the coronavirus. And global coronavirus deaths now have hit 108,000 cases, over 1.7 million have contracted the virus. And an unusual fact this week, Tuesday, the Russian space agency Roscosmos accused Trump of trying to create a basis to take over other planets after he signed an executive order on Monday outlining U.S. policy on commercial mining in space, which includes the moon and also asteroids. Neanderthals were found to have used plant fibers to create string over 40,000 years ago after a French site where they hunted reindeer they found in a site there. More evidence also says a scientist of the ingenuity and cognitive capabilities, which is the closest extinct human relatives. Scientists also have learned how to calculate the age of whale sharks due to the radioactive fallout after the Cold War era atomic bombing testing. They are measuring the levels of carbon-14, which is a natural radioactive element, on the distinct bands inside of the whale sharks, the cartilage vertebrae, which are the largest fish in the world and on Earth. It's very similar to the tree's growth ring, so that's actually pretty interesting because they couldn't tell the age of these whale sharks before. And in a mining company called Minas de Oro Nacional, their operator, it's a Canadian company, which has a silver mine in Sorona, the state of Sorona in Mexico. There was a theft where they stole gold and silver alloys before fleeing in a light aircraft. And the robbery occurred at the Mulatos mine when security was trying to transfer the bars of precious metals onto a plane. So that might happen a little bit more often. Remember, you can always find the podcast on iTunes or even Spotify. Just look up Day Trading Academy. Don't forget to subscribe here on the channel. We'll see you next week.